Leadership is who you are, management is what you do. Leadership is who you are, management's what you do. Daughter, artist, friend, wife, mother, president of VARC Incorporated, my friend Liz Filter.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. This is my first time here in Milwaukee at the Citywide, so I appreciate you being here. Tom, thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you for the invitation, Dick. Thank you to Alverno for hosting us here. I am on the clock, so I'm going to make this as quick as possible. But as Tom had mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of VARC. We provide services for people with disabilities. We serve about 1,000 people annually from La Crosse to Racine and a lot of places in between. And I share that because I want to share just a little bit of a portion of my journey through servant leadership thus far. I've been at the organization for 24 years about, and leadership isn't new to me, but this role as the CEO was. And I've been in it about 6 years, so my servant leadership path had started right about that time when I was introduced to the concept through a talk that I had attended at Viterbo University with Tom Thibodeau. And I want to share just a couple of anecdotal stories really briefly on what that has looked like and what that kind of transformation from this hierarchical leadership style to servant leadership has looked like for me, and try to share a couple practical things that you can take home. That was a great note for whomever had noted that. So the first story goes back to when I was first starting in this role, and as a young female CEO, I had a lot to prove. And some of you may feel like you're in that same kind of position. Male, female, older, younger, whether you're tenured or not, sometimes in leadership and management, we feel like we have to do some things for other people to respect us and to trust us and to be able to be guided by us. So I really needed to take a look at working on the way in which I redesigned some of the systems that we had at VARC. So the first story is with regards to a director that I supervised. And we went through a performance review. Anybody have those in your work? Okay. And so it was very standard when I inherited it. Changed some things, which I thought was really great. Instead of this, we made it that, and it seemed really more engaging. Instead of me just telling the person, this is where you lined up, we added in this other component where they would also give their own feedback, and that's kind of standard. So I thought, all right, we're making progress on this. Met with one of my directors, and she was a good high performer, and her responses were very positive in self-reflection, and mine were also, it wasn't bad, but they were targeted towards some of her growth and some of the things that I wanted to see her keep moving forward on, and she didn't receive that very well. The method by which we had this system was, you tell me your score, I'll tell you what your score is, back and forth, 1 through 5, and they didn't align. And then it ended, and she sat with that, and it didn't feel really great for her, and she ended up leaving. There were probably other elements going on too, of course, but that was a big driver to launch her into seeking out employment elsewhere. And I lost a big home run hitter. And that made me think about what is that situation doing not only for that person and our relationship, but for other people in the organization as well. We employ about 525 people. A half of those are folks with disabilities that we serve, and the remaining folks are staff, and they all receive reviews like this. So what we did is I charged my HR manager to disrupt this entire system. This thing is not going to work. I was right in the midst of learning more about the concepts of servant leadership, and I decided to look inward in my own experience, but also have this relate to all of our other directors and managers, and think about what it is that we were offering to the employee during that review period. So we built in other things like, so we totally revamped it into a roadmap, and it's an acronym. It stands for all kinds of things. But the critical component is that we removed the scale system, which really makes people focus on how am I being graded, and less on talking about the narrative and giving examples about what their performance actually looked like given the course of the year. And also added in SMART goals, and this is probably familiar language, but giving people something to attach to and move forward through on their own personal professional growth, not the deliverables of their department. And then also asking what resources and guidance do you need in order to get through that for the next 12-month period. Okay, so that's one. The second example I have is regarding our performance and disciplinary process. So we implemented, and in my earliest part of this role, changed from going directly to a disciplinary report. You do something wrong, you get written up, you do it again, you maybe get written up again, maybe you don't right away, and that was kind of it. And we implemented a performance improvement plan. Yes, we're familiar with that? Okay. And that was okay. And I thought, this is great. We've got now a plan to improve your performance. And what I failed to do in that moment of designing that was to say, but where's my accountability for your performance? So that first iteration was, I'm going to list out all these things that I see you not doing or that you are doing that need to change. And here's all my ideas about what you're supposed to do instead. And here's the timeline by which you need to fulfill that. And that worked okay, except we were not being accountable. I was not being accountable to my own folks on what resources, what training, what's an appropriate timeline for you, what am I not doing, what could I be doing differently, what do I need to add, where's my value in this, where is my shared accountability in your growth and the support of these folks that we're working with to improve. And so that was the second kind of failed attempt that I had to make some significant changes on. And the reason I wanted to share those two examples, there's plenty more, by the way, plenty. The reason I wanted to share some of the examples was because it wasn't only enough to identify there's principles that I'm missing, there's empathy that's missing as components of this, there's service that might not be there. The more important piece was, what did I do about it, and what's the behavior that follows? So the new people here, where servant leadership is really a brand new concept, and even those who have kind of been in it and living in it and doing some of the work for some time, and veterans, I think can share the experience of, we can sit here and have conversations, and this is really great and it's really valuable. What's more important is that we're applying these things later and taking a look at and disrupting the things that don't match what our actual values are. So if there's one thing I can try to note to take away today, it's that all of these concepts are really wonderful and beautiful and they matter so much. And what's more important is that we're applying them. So what does your behavior look like when you leave today? Where are your values that you feel really excited about and charged about after we talk today being applied in your organizations, in your communities, in your lives, in your families? And how is that manifesting as actual reality? So that's what I will challenge you to think about as we have conversations today. Those are two ways in which I applied those same concepts into my work behavior and had to do some self-reflection to be able to mirror my own values and what I talked about a lot in these servant leadership conversations into practical application. Okay, so I'm probably running up against time, but just wanted to share one last time that I think there is a beauty in our openness at these roundtable kinds of conversations. And I think if you can take note and try to relate to the things that other people say and then apply those when you go home, that's where the real work comes in, but also the real end product can be awesome and amazing too. So thank you all for the few minutes of your time here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is it's my pleasure to introduce her. I asked her because we've shared a lot of the bios and things like that, but I asked her for one thing that's not in the bios that she's very proud of, and so Fabiola Ramirez, who is the chief of staff at Carmen Schools, shared that she is an alumna, a teacher, a leader, and now an executive at Carmen Schools. So she's very proud of that, and here she is to talk about her aspects of servant leadership.
Thank you, Jean. I'm so excited to be here. Buenos dias, good morning to everyone. My name is Fabi Ramirez. I'm going to start with a little call and response, so hopefully a few of you are ready to share out in a second. First, I want you to think about that person who believed in you before you believed in yourself. Maybe it was a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a parent, someone who saw your potential before you did, someone who pushed you and made sure that you knew that they cared. Would two people be willing to shout that person's name really briefly? Anybody else? Diana. Perfect. Thank you. That feeling, that memory is exactly what I want to talk to you about today. Next slide. Sorry, next one. Next one. Okay. For me, it was my parents. My dad would always tell me, you can be anything you want to be. And every morning before I left for school, my mom would speak life into me, saying, recuerda que vales mucho y mereces respeto, which translates to remember, you are valuable and worthy of respect. They also held me to a strict curfew and did not play around when it came to grades. They gave me confidence and they gave me grounding and taught me early on what it means to lead with both empathy and expectations. And the values they instilled in me are part of the reason I decided to work in education for the past 8 years. My journey started as a student, literally walking the same halls, sitting in the same classrooms, and facing many of the same challenges that the students I now serve face. Since then, I've been, as Jean shared, a teacher, a school leader, and now serve as chief of staff, helping shape the future of our schools through systems and strategy. And across every role I've held, I've learned one powerful truth about leadership. It's never either or, it's always both and. In education, many leaders often fall into either or narratives. Do we lead with empathy or do we hold high expectations? Do we build relationships or should we focus on results? Do we give grace or do we hold the line? But real leaders don't choose one or the other. They lead with both. Empathy and accountability, compassion and clarity, warmth and high expectations. Because here's the truth. Empathy without expectations might feel good, but it doesn't help people grow. Expectations without empathy might drive short-term results, but won't help build trust or lasting change. True servant leadership lives in that tension. It's about seeing people not just as they are, but as whom they can be. One of the first times I experienced the power of "and" was my first year teaching. We had a 7:30 a.m. huddle every morning, and almost every day I showed up at 1:31, maybe 1:32. I'd be hustling up 3 flights of stairs, water bottle in one hand, backpack half zipped, trying not to drop my phone, and hoping they had not started yet. But we were a small team, everybody noticed. The first time it happened, my boss followed me to my room. No public call out, no passive-aggressive email, just a quiet and direct question. Is there something getting in the way of you being here on time? How can I help? I told the truth. Honestly, no, I just needed to leave my house 5 minutes earlier. So he nodded and said, okay, you've got this. But then I was late again. The second time, his tone stayed calm, but the message was clear. Our team starts our day together. It matters to our values and what we committed to at the beginning of the year. Make sure you figure out how to be on time moving forward. That was it. I was never late again, at least not that year. He didn't shame me. He didn't let it slide. He held space for my humanity, but he didn't lower the bar. That small moment showed me something big. He had high expectations for me, but he was also ready to support me to meet them. That combination helps shape how I serve and lead others. That mindset carried over into my work with students as a teacher. One student in particular, we'll call her Annabelle, taught me how important that balance really is. It was the first day of school and my first day teaching. Next slide. And if you see this picture, it's hard to tell who the teacher and the students are. So I knew I had to hold my own. During our first hour, which we call advisory, Annabelle walked up to me and said, "Who do I talk to about changing my advisor?" As she walked into my classroom. No hello, no smile, just a challenge. I remember standing at the door and giving myself a little pep talk. It's okay, you got this. Annabelle pushed every rule, tested every boundary. She needed empathy in ways many of my other students did not. She also needed consistency, someone who believed in her, and she needed high expectations. Now, you might expect me to say, I believed in her, and by the end of the year, she turned it all around. But that's not what happened. It took 4 years. 4 years of showing up with both patience and expectations, of reminders, check-ins, second chances, and tough conversations. It took 4 years of, I'm not giving up on you, but I'm also not lowering the bar. And when she graduated during COVID, after everything we'd been through, it was emotional. Her success felt like a small miracle in the making. But it didn't end there. Annabelle later worked as a paraprofessional for our schools. And one day we connected, and with tears in her eyes, she says to me, "I'm sorry for everything I put you through. Now that I work with our students, I see how hard it really is." That moment, I'll never forget it. But Annabelle's story isn't about a perfect turnaround. It's about what becomes possible when we lead both with empathy and high expectations. This principle doesn't just apply to students, it applies everywhere. Whether you lead a classroom, a school, or an organization, people don't just need leaders who understand them. They need leaders who believe in them enough to push them towards their best. That's what it means to lead with empathy and accountability. That's what it means to move beyond either or narratives. And that's what it means to be a servant leader. I'll leave you with this. Last slide. Think about the people you lead, the individuals and the teams around you, and ask yourself, am I leading both with empathy and high expectations? Where might I be leaning too far into either or narratives? And lastly, where can I lean into the power of and? Because the best leaders don't just help people feel seen. They help people see themselves, not just as they are, but as what they can be. And when we lead with both heart and accountability, we help them get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was wonderful. It's my pleasure now to introduce a colleague and a friend. I also worked with Fabi for a while, too. It was pretty cool. A colleague and a friend at MSOE, Natalie Villegas, is currently the director of the Create Institute at MSOE. And I asked her the same question. I said, so what's one thing that's not in the bios that you really like to share with everybody? And she said, well, I come from a family of educators. I thought that was cool. Natalie, let us know. Come on.
Jean's already going to make me cry, so. So the clicker's not working, so Fabi's going to graciously do my slides. I know I have 10 minutes, or 9 minutes. This morning I practiced and it was 18 minutes, so we're going to get through this. We're going to go a little faster. So as Jean said, my name is Natalie Villegas. We can do the next slide. I know my title is about self-awareness, but I'll tell you how they're interlinked, empathy and self-awareness. So who is Natalie? I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not too far from here. My mother is I was raised in a single parent household. I have two older brothers. My mom was an educator for 36 years in Milwaukee Public Schools. I should have known that I'd fall into education. I actually went to MSOE for my undergraduate, so I do have an architectural engineering degree, which is fantastic and really, really led me to where I'm at right now. So the funny thing is, in 2012, my brother and I, Juan, actually were able to graduate together because we both graduated from MSOE, him with a management information systems degree, myself with an architectural engineering degree. My servant leadership journey starts with me falling on my face. And I continue to do this until you become a better leader. So in 2012, I took a big girl job upon graduating from MSOE in Indiana. So I drove 4 hours, took the position at an architectural engineering firm. It was great. It was fantastic, very supportive group. It was wonderful until it wasn't. So from there, I had two major self-awareness learning lessons that year. So as a millennial, I love dictionary terms, right? So I went to Google, really. And Oxford Languages describes self-awareness as this: the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. Okay? In that year, while I was practicing engineering, I came to the realization I don't like engineering, which I'd spent 4 years studying, right? I like doing engineering things. I like problem solving. I like working collaboratively in groups. I love bringing value to people. But the whole engineering discipline really didn't fit me. And like Liz said, there wasn't an alignment there, right? So I learned that, which was my big self-awareness lesson. And the second thing I learned was community and community building is very important to me. Being part of my family is also very important to me, right? There's an ideology called familialism in which you place a priority on being with family. And that's what happened to me. So upon realizing this, really, and falling flat on my face, I came back to Wisconsin. I moved back with the support of my family. Didn't have really a solid job. I did what I call my soul-searching years, really from like 24 to 26, which was great. I had a lot of odd jobs, but then something remarkable happened to me, and I was kicked off of my mom's insurance, oddly enough, right? You get old enough and they kick you off. And I knew I had to get insurance because when I was in college, I was diagnosed with lupus. So I was dealing with that, trying to find a new life, right? I call it my quarter-life crisis, which, yes, it is a thing, okay? Quarter-life crisis is a thing. With that, I came back, was searching for passion and fulfillment. So what did I do? It's like, oh my goodness, where can I find really good health insurance? Where? I became a K4 para professional in MPS. So part of that, becoming a K4 para, really was my transition into building capacity for empathy, right? And empathy, again, from the dictionary, right, is the action of understanding, being aware, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing feelings, thoughts, and an experience of another. So as you may be aware, or maybe not, I'm a very empathetic person, so empathy comes very naturally to me. I also come from a culture in which they emphasize empathy for others. So that wasn't a problem. What was an issue was actually regulating my own emotions, right? You take in a lot of energy when you're very empathetic. How do you deal with that, right? So as K4 para, as you can see, like 4-year-olds have a lot of emotions, a lot of big emotions, right? And their families. So how can I build self-awareness to what I need, right, as to be a servant leader, but also be engaged with others in a way that I could be the best self, my best selves for them. So as a K4 para, I had an amazing teacher that I was paired up with, Miss Keating. She was actually Teacher of the Year for MPS, so that's a high accolade for teachers. And one of the things that she showed me was the capacity for empathy needed to be an educator. How many educators are in the room? Yes. We love you. Just know that. The power of education is one that cares for students, for families, for communities, and society. So give them a hand. So I went from one extreme to another, K4 to high school. I actually became a high school teacher. I was at Alexander Hamilton High School, which I want to say practice, but no, I taught there for about 3 years. I loved it. High schoolers were my jam. Teaching them and being engaged with them and how funny they were, and they're one of the most empathetic groups of humans ever, right? They're going through life changes. They're trying to support their peers. They see you having a bad day as an educator. They're trying to cheer you up, right? High schoolers are awesome. One of the things that I learned in this particular instance was learning to discern my own feelings with these students from the emotions and feelings that they had, right? And to build that healthy boundary. As you can tell, I'm a very emotional person, so building that healthy boundary was key. Fast forward, another servant leader that you know, Dr. Deanna Lightsky, that Jean is filling in for. She was my advisor in undergraduate, but she was also still a friend, which is kind of odd to say, but still my friend as I was going through these life transitions. And she came in as a guest speaker in one of my Project Lead the Way courses. So she was telling me about the Create Institute at MSOE that she was starting. And really the focus of Create Institute was bringing experiential learning opportunities to students at MSOE, but doing that through building a mindset, which we call MSOE Mindset. That students and graduates will leave the university being leaders of character, responsible professionals, passionate learners, and value creators. I said, wow, that sounds like a great, great place to be. So I was perusing their website one day, and I saw a job opening, and I took it. That was my leap. You could go ahead, Fabi. Took my leap. I went in as a project coordinator, and the first task I had, Deanna goes, "You taught high school?" I said, "Yes, I did." She goes, "How about you design the Create Student Fellow program?" Deanna's my boss now, so I was like, "Sure, whatever you need, Deanna, I will design that program." So really, the program we designed was a servant leadership program. It is intended to be a leadership development program that infuses servant leadership, entrepreneurial mindset, and the MSOE mindset. So these students acted as peer mentors for each other, and they really, really offered support for both co-curricular and extracurricular activities. Now, I know Jean has given me a warning, so now we're on our last slide, which is great timing, y'all. I know somebody said if we could have some good takeaways. This is my takeaway slide. One, right? Be unapologetically yourself, right? In order to be a successful servant leader, you have to be willing, one, to fall, because it's going to happen. But what you do when you fall, or you stumble, or you scrape your face on the concrete, right? All those things heal. You get back up, and you continue to move forward. Second thing, Build relationships. People want to be heard, seen, and felt. 2 great books that I recommend. This is your takeaway. The Good Life and 10 to 25. 10 to 25 is really good about motivating students from the ages of, students and just young people, from the ages of 10 to 25 years old. Okay? Practice grace. It's going to happen. You're going to fall. You have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with other people also falling and you helping them back up. Okay? Last thing, leadership is a verb, right? We are all leaders, yes, but leadership is a verb. There should be some kind of action behind it. So what is your actionable thing today? You're here, right? We're here for 90 minutes together. Well, what are you taking back? How are you pushing forward? Okay? To my educators, keep pushing, keep fighting the good fight. You're seen, you are heard, and you're felt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask all of our presenters to come up. We have a panel where you get to ask questions. You can direct them to one or all of the presenters. So please get your questions ready, and we will. I'll call on you. Speak up nice and loud so we can hear the question, and you have microphones there so they can hear the answers. So again, thank you very much for your presentations. Okay, who has a question? Yes, ma'am.
So now I'm a paraprofessional, and I love it at MPS. And I was just wondering, for a couple Carmen schools, can you tell me a little bit about that if you want, and then about your experience with K-4? Because I do K-4 through 8th grade.
Yes, thank you for the question. So Carmen Schools is a public charter network of 6 schools in the Milwaukee community. We serve both the south side and the north side of Milwaukee, predominantly low-income Black and Latino students in the area.
Okay.
For the K-4, setting, just have fun. They want to have fun. I say that what draws me to education, especially as you're dealing with younger students, is they still have that awe and wonder, right? Everything's cool to them, and everything's fun. And the main thing that educators should do is try to keep that as long as possible.
When do you cut bait? And I think you know what I mean by that, right? They make you like, I can't do this because you didn't do this. I can't do that because you didn't do that. You know, when do you know that employee is not going to perform regardless of what you put on it in front of them?
I think it starts earlier on. I'll back up a little bit before we get to that point where somebody is requiring that kind of level of support. And there is a degree of accountability of the person who is hiring and training and supporting that person well before it's that person's issue or problem, to have identified them as appropriate for that role in the first place, and then given them the correct level of training and everything that comes along, onboarding and all of the things that make that person prepared to avoid that kind of conversation. But to answer your question, I think there's a really good and moment that is support and empathy, but you have got to commit to being at this level in terms of your performance. When somebody commits to that, and then regardless of the challenges that continue to confront that person, I think the commitment is more important than the actual arrival. And if somebody's willing to move the needle and demonstrate what's needed, and with mutual kind of support and accountability that can be demonstrated through incremental change, positive change toward that goal, I don't think that, I think there's an indefinite space for that person to improve as long as, again, they're willing to get there and demonstrate over time that they're reaching milestones. The difference is when this is not my fault, it's yours. You didn't train me. I'm not willing to. All of that has to go away for both parties in order for them to be able to even get to a place of improvement. It doesn't matter who was responsible to begin with. At the end of the day, I am. But that person also needs to be mutually prepared and willing to go to the next step. And when that doesn't exist, it won't get there for either of you. And there's toxicity that starts to, fester kind of in the person's workplace and in their work, and you can see that then. But otherwise, that willingness and ability to improve incrementally over time is more important and should create indefinite space, in my opinion.
Thank you. That's great.
After all that, what do you do for self-care to take care of you to continue on to be that positive person in the work?
I think to something Natalie spoke to earlier, you have to figure out what fills your cup, right? And for me, it's also family. It's spending time with my loved ones, uninterrupted time. We love soccer in my family, so we're at soccer events and outdoors a lot on the weekend. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not actively doing something, but I'm doing something that I love and that is different from what I do day to day so that I can re-energize and then be able to come back strong when I go back to work.
Natalie, you got one?
Yeah, so I'm a doctoral student right now at Marquette University as well. So I don't have a lot of free time, downtime. But I will say it's finding something that can recharge you, but also you can get something out of it. So mine is just reading a lot of research because that allows me to think differently. And that it also recharges me. And also I have to do it, so.
Liz?
We're familiar with work-life balance.
The concept.
Yeah. I decided that's not for me. And I've adopted a philosophy of work-life blend. And that affords me incremental little bits of me time, family time, work time, so that I don't have to take a 2-week vacation to escape something. I can still be embedded within my work when I need to, and myself when I need to, and my family when I need to, and my community when I need to. And because all of those things work together so harmoniously for me, that adopting that mindset and ability to be flexible has really brought me a lot of peace, and that has helped me be able to sustain my work and my life really well.
Thank you. Thank you.
For all of you, what are your thoughts on leading with compassion and sort of keeping that wall between being taken advantage of?
I'm going to steal Fabi's notes again because I have approached a couple different conversations on servant leadership, starting with, we've adopted at VARC, or I have, and so I guess inherently everybody else adopts this, tone of empathy meets accountability. And what really resonated from that and that I really align with is that we don't have to devalue our expectations or pull the line down in terms of where we, or the rules, or bend, or have people take advantage of the fact that we want to empower people and provide empathy and understand there's certain situations, and so that really resonates with me. And we have changed our language and our tone around, like, if this, for example, if this role isn't what you believed it was, or it's not working for you, or you don't believe you can meet the expectations, that's okay. We don't hold that against you. You might not be working here for very long, but it's okay. It's not problematic. You don't have to feel bad for it. And so it's a little bit of a different shift. Our expectations haven't changed. We still need somebody to do this work. That's very important. We'll help you get there. We're going to do whatever we can to do that. But it doesn't mean that that we don't hold you accountable any longer, or we don't value the role of the position like we did before. That's the change that we've kind of had to take.
Yeah, I would say clarity is kind, right? Setting really clear expectations around how do we engage, what are our values as an organization, as people who work together. What do those look like in action? What does it feel like, sound like, and look like to live out those values? And then that's who we are, right? Here, that's our flavor. Our CEO loves to say, this is our flavor, right? If you like this flavor and you buy into these values, like, we love to have you here. And paired with that is always, I always say, high expectations, but also high support for the people that need it, right? And if you've done both, you've held the expectation, it's clear what your norms are, what your values are as an organization, and you've supported people to get there, and we're still missing the mark, I think that's when you gotta have more critical conversations about, maybe this isn't your flavor, right? Maybe you're looking for something different than what we are striving for at this organization. So I would just say clarity is kind. Be really clear about your values and what that looks like, sounds like, feels like, and support people to get there.
Yeah, lastly, I would say it comes down to mutual respect, right? You have to have mutual respect with your colleagues, within the organization. And another thing is, I like to think of the idea of sense of care, right? We're all human beings, and we all make mistakes, right? But if you are respecting one another, and then you have that sense of care, of seeing each other and trying your best, then I think that comes across.
How do you use the principles of servant leadership in order to be able to help your staff and your organization be able to navigate change?
I'll repeat the question. How do you use the principles of servant leadership to navigate change? And leave it there. So.
Do you want me to start? Yeah, we're actually going through a lot of change right now in higher ed, right? I won't go into a long rant about that. But one of the things that I think about when it comes to servant leadership is really understanding your role as a leader, right? Your role as a leader is to be a facilitator, to listen, to be empathetic, to have these difficult conversations, to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. So I think a lot of components of servant leadership come into the mix as you're leading change, mostly because it's scary, right? And it's new. And we are humans, and that's not what we like to do. But I think leveraging servant leader principles like listening, being empathetic, being self-aware, right? Those are things that will really push you forward as you're having these critical conversations about change.
Yeah, I double down on how important it is to listen, reflect, and take action on feedback during change management. It's something that I think we try to lean in a lot as we're also going through quite a bit of change. We have a new CEO this year. We're building a new facility, right? So we have quite a few different things happening in our organization, and we always keep going back to like servant leadership. The first word on there is serve. Right? It's to serve. Our job as leaders of this organization is to serve our students, our families, our staff. And what does that mean for the people that we serve? We have to listen to them. We constantly are seeking that feedback, whether it's the surveys, one-on-one connections. We're coming to campuses, we're walking them, right? We're going into classrooms, and then we're responding to that feedback to ensure that we're understanding how everybody's experiencing that change, and we're being responsive immediately. So listening deeply and carefully, reflecting, and then serving, which is what we're called to do.
Yeah,
What you said.
all what you said, for sure. I would add. I think there's especially in a executive leadership role, when going through an organizational change, at whatever scale that looks like. It's really important to include others at the table as part of the conversation and to steer what it needs to look like. I'm one person, for example, and I have a vision most of the time, and sometimes that doesn't align with what other directors and departments believe is in the best interest of the organization, and those things all have to be aligned. So including people at the table, regardless of the level of their role and position, to help inform is really important. Secondly, to have an appropriate level, and I'll emphasize the appropriate level of transparency on what direction the organization might be going, what the change is going to look like, how it's going to impact people throughout the organization, and what their level of involvement is going to be along the way and what it's not, and to have a lot of clarity around that is pretty critical. And then to trust the competency of the people who you've hired to do the stuff. And that's a mistake I think that I've made, that a lot of leaders make, is that their decision or that their vision and their direction is the right one no matter what. But there are other people who are highly competent in helping to inform and make those decisions, and you have to be able to trust that they're going to do that and then allow them to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for all of your sharing of your ideas and thoughts and presentations. Now it's your turn. Start talking and then share back at least one principle from your table. Thank you very much. Let's give a hand to our presenters. Thank you.
Like, you can be compassionate and empathetic for somebody while also...
Yeah, so you're not 9 to 5. It's
Exactly.
like, yeah. Yeah. Might be Alright, I'll do it.
Okay, we're going to go around the room and we're going to capture one deliverable. By the way, everything is being recorded here for future use and those kind of things. So Tom is going to write things down. So we will start. You want to start?
So we spoke about a lot of different things, but the take home that we're going to give to the room is the idea of intrinsic leadership. And you can lead people outside of you organizationally, but how do you hold yourself accountable to serving yourself with the same characteristics of servant leadership in your day-to-day actions as you do your external community?
Thank you. Great.
We talked a lot about the idea of empathy and expectations. And we thought it was interesting that we all come from different industries and different careers, and it still resonated with us, that empathy and expectations. And we talked a little bit about us setting good expectations, but also are we providing those to our employer as well? Kind of a round table looking inward with that self-awareness.
Good. Thank you very much.
We also talked about empathy and the idea of both and. How do we hold people accountable and support them to reach the mark that we've set for them, or that the company has set for them. So yeah, I think that's our takeaway. It was really good.
We spent quite a bit of time talking about Liz's concept of work-life blend, how envious we are of whatever that truly means. But the conversation really went to, we come from the nonprofit world, and how what that balance or blend looks like for people who just can't work remotely and have that flexibility versus people who can, and what kind of culture that creates within an organization.
We actually talked about all of the leaders, and one thing that we all together came up with is important to build relationships through trust, respect, and the most important, humbleness. And we just believe that they all did that as well.
Great.
The power of and how that word really opens up passageways during conversations and other experiences for feedback, and we really just resonated with that theme.
So listening to understand, not to respond, to respect others' beliefs, to be seen and heard and hear from their cultural perspective as well, and then consideration for the whole person, not just the job that they do, but one of the other last things that we talked about was about bringing the ideas and the tenets of servant leadership to the table and making sure we talk about it in that realm, in that servant leadership focus.
Great.
Everyone's stories matter, and knowing each other's stories help us with perspective and empathy. It also empowers you both to be in relationship when you have that connection of knowing their story.
In our table, we had a very interesting conversation. First, we talked about alignment, which was alignment with that work-life blend. There's a totally different concept, but then we also kind of focused on what does a leader look like when you provide support. And so the conversation round around, when you provide a support, you are in one of the strongest leadership available, because without your support, people wouldn't be able to function. So it was very interesting. Thank you all speakers.
I hate to sound like a broken wheel here, but we were concentrating and with the "and" statement as well. It all has to go together to work properly, and it's not just at work either. One of our colleagues left, but she said to really get into the habit, you practice it throughout your life, not just at work.
Yeah.
And I think that's a vital statement.
Great, thank you.
Empathy, thank you. So the and the importance of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
So we started, one person had to leave before we started, but he said he wanted to talk about what happens, what do you do when stuff goes sideways? And we turned that into listening and many of the other things that we talked about. But we settled on one concept that hasn't been brought up, I don't think, and that is we are all leaders all the time. And some of us in here know where that quote comes from, but it's an important concept.
Great, thank you.
We built off of the "and" as well, but we talked about really understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. Because I think if you get into, I think someone brought it up where, what do you do with someone who keeps coming back at you? You don't give me enough training, you don't give me enough of this and that. We all love people, we're caring, but sometimes you fall into the trap of being sympathetic. Oh, that poor person. Empathy, you can have clear expectations, you can be empathetic and understand their situation, their feelings, and we have work to do, and here are the expectation how we can get you there. So
good, good.
Everyone stole our topic ideas.
Thank you. But
but we talked about our different experiences with yearly reviews and how do we make equity work within our teams, and definitely talked about work-life blend as well.
So we talked about a lot of stuff as well at this table. We sort of finished with not really, like, making sure that we're aware that we don't know everybody's stories, we don't know where they're coming from, what kind of day they're having. In my profession specifically, there's a lot of mental health, I'll say, issues out there that we need to recognize and give folks space for to manage. So if we have somebody that's just having a moment, needs to talk, needs to vent, needs to do whatever, that's the support that we can give to them. So that they can continue on to do the roles and meet the expectations that we've set for them. But just, again, listening, the "and" concept as well continues to come up. So that's a very, very great way to kind of phrase that so you can put a principle in words. So
great, thank you. Thank you. Give yourselves a hand.
Pay attention to intrinsic leadership. Pay attention to the inward journey. Pay attention to empathy and expectations. Clear expectations lead to clarity. Clarity is kindness. Empathy includes both and. It's inclusive. Work-life blend, and what does blend look like? How do we blend that in our organizations and make it a cultural reality? Build relationships through respect, trust, and most importantly, humility. The power of "and," which is inclusive. Listen to understand other beliefs. Understand that people come to work each and every day and bring their whole selves. To maintain this focus, you need servant leadership conversations on a regular basis. Everyone's stories matter. Alignment. What support does a leader need in order to be successful? How does a leader ask for that kind of support? And it means about working together, but it has to be practiced throughout a lifetime in each and every encounter that we have each and every day. Accountability means how is it that I hold myself accountable and responsible for the growth and development of others. When stuff goes sideways, we recognize that we are all leaders all the time. We are not victims. The difference between empathy and sympathy, and may I add the difference between empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Experience of the year-end review. How can we get better at assessing and giving people feedback? Be sensitive and compassionate and empathetic to the burdens that other people carry. Understand that the principle of servant leadership is service in action.
You certainly have gotten it here this morning. If you're confident, if you're strong, you're optimistic, you have a different effect on those around you. Confident, strong, and optimistic. Yesterday I had a meeting with an artist who is extraordinary genius. He mixes paint for different kinds of constituencies for this painting to make sure that he includes all these elements of our society. And in this particular case, it's a picture, it's a painting of Cindy. Cindy is a well-known person in Wisconsin. She was in 8 foster homes, and the last one drenched her in lighter fluid and lit her on fire. She survived a year, 18 surgeries, and she is an exemplar. Anybody got a problem? Think about that. She is known with all the legislators, anything with handicapped people, disadvantaged. She's there to look at the legislation and tell the legislators this word and that word, kind of very detailed, well known. She's a national champion, local champion in Wisconsin. Governor from Kentucky. They had a tornado that went through. When they had heads up. Everybody, all the neighbors, make sure everybody got in the basement. Nobody died. And right after that was a rainstorm for 4 solid days. They knew it was coming. Everybody in the low part, out of your houses, go over there, get in other people's houses. And it all worked. What do you call that? Is that a problem? A street person, do you say hello to him, or do you walk across the street? A young lady that's being dragged along the sidewalk, maybe 6, 7 years old at the most. Parents are shouting at her. She's wailing away. Would you walk across the street? Well, this is a real case in my case. I walked across the street to go over to stop this nonsense. I never looked at the parents. You don't know what's going on there. I looked at the child. I said, what a beautiful child you are. Your parents must be so proud of you. All of a sudden, everything kind of calmed down. They quit tugging at her. She kind of stopped crying, not totally. And I kept moving, never looked at the parents, and I told her what a wonderful child she was, a child of God. And I kept going. So I would suggest to you that all of us, where we are, well, let me give you this artist. I never finished that story. He said, what a terrible thing is going on in our society. And his wife works at UWM and teaches English as a second language to very outstanding foreign students. Their staff got cut in half. He was madder than the dickens about that. He's a very empathetic guy. I said, you know, what happened to my cell phone? I was looking something up for him. And I knew where I left it. I went back there. It wasn't there. I had no trouble with that. You know what's on your cell phone? Holy cats, man up a tree. I went to the counter. I said, iPhone there? Oh, yeah, right here it is. Hand it to me. Okay, I went back to the table. And I said, well, he said, weren't you worried about that? I said, no, because most of the time all this stuff works out just fine. It's a lot of good people. He says, you know, you're right. 90% of the people in this world, that's what they do. We just spend too much time on the 10%. And I don't know if those percentages are right or wrong. But know that you're in a position to spread a good message. Not to tell, to empathize with other people. To give them encouragement. Servant Leadership, a book written in this state, from the middle. He wrote a book, Servant Leadership from the Middle. I gave it to a couple of people, and down south, and the one young man said, "Man, that put it together with me." Another one said, another younger man, 5 years, 6 years older than him, said, "I love that book. Makes so much sense." And they're in the middle of chaos. Tom?
3 things I listened to today. 1, 3 remarkable young women sat in front of us. 3 remarkable young women who have found their voice to speak with clarity, confidence, compassion, and courage. Courage, as Hemingway described it, is grace under pressure. To be a servant leader today, I think, is to be a person of courage, to find your voice, to speak up, speak the truth with love. The 3 of you did that, you did that so eloquently. Thank you so very much. Second, foundation of servant leadership, of all leadership, is self-awareness. What percentage of the American population is self-aware? 10%. The greatest temptation that all of us face right now, and many of you have faced it all throughout this morning, is distraction, being pulled apart, not being fully present. And it's very easy right now to be distracted by the loudest voices. So what happens is that whatever a leader pays attention to, that's what everyone else in the organization pays attention to. Look for the good stuff. How important it is, that level in terms of self-awareness. Third, a word that came up that's very, very important is discern. It comes from 2 Latin words, discernere, which means to cut away. What does that seem? To be pruned. Who likes to be pruned? Who likes to have some of that kind of stuff cut away? It's painful to be a good leader. It demands sacrifice, if you will. You have to have the willingness to stand in the pain of other people. So when I ask people, do you want to be a servant leader? Do you have the greed for excessive pain? Well, what is empathy? To empathize in terms of all the things that Dick just talked about, the people that are suffering, to be aware. Now, here it is in terms of the neuroscience. There's a difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is the early alert system to pain that's going on. Compassion is our ability to respond. And what happens in terms of neuroscience, different parts of our brain light up when we are empathetic or when we are compassionate. And that's very, very important. We need to keep both alive. And finally, it's about mindset, what we pay attention to. So you would be disappointed if I didn't end with a story. Equation. E plus R equals O. Class, E plus R equals O. Everybody in the class. E plus R equals O. What does it mean? The events in our life. We have little or no control over the events of our life. You have no control over what goes on in Washington, D.C. today. You have no control over the markets. You have no control over the crazy traffic here in Milwaukee. I want to just tell you that. No control. I mean, think, even in terms of our own health, we all know how fragile we are. The events in our life, the things that take place, we always have control over the R. What is our response to the event or our interpretation of the event? How am I going to respond in that moment? And so it becomes a habit. Do I respond with compassion, empathy? Is my first choice to listen, to understand, to be fully present? And then it equals O, and we never will know what the outcomes are going to be. If we knew what the outcomes were going to be from today, it'd be manipulation. Everybody walks away today with what you need. Now, I try to practice that. And ask a group of this. Write it down. Talk about an event in your life, response, and obstacle. So I'm working with a construction group, and I say, okay, nominate somebody at your table. Who has a good story? I'll point to Jake. Jake said, well, 12 years ago, he said I was set up with a blind date. It was the same day I was getting a new smartphone. It took 2 extra hours. I showed up for a blind date 2 hours late. The woman had waited for me. I said, do you want to go out? She said, sure. She said, that was 12 years ago. We've been married for 11 years and have 3 kids. Her response changed his life. That's how our lives are changed, is by those responses in the moment. So Jake's walking out, and I said, Jake, where do you live? He said, Blair, Wisconsin. I said, do you like living in Blair? Oh, he said, nice place between Eau Claire and La Crosse. But actually, I'm from Peshtigo. I said, Peshtigo? My dad grew up on a farm 20 miles from Peshtigo in Coleman, Wisconsin. And my aunt saved her life by jumping into the Peshtigo River during the Great Peshtigo Fire. And I said, my cousin was a middle school teacher in Peshtigo. In fact, he came to graduate school at Viterbo in 1990, and when he came, he brought down his fishing boat. He's from northern Wisconsin. He wasn't going to miss a summer of fishing just to go to school. He walked in the class with, "Hi, cuz." He's my mom's second cousin, my mom's first cousin, my second cousin. We became good friends. I go up to stay in Peshtigo and I go and teach up there. On our first night after class, he stops at a Quick Trip, goes and gets 10 pounds of ice. I said, "Cuz, 10 pounds of ice? Cuz, old fashions." I said, we have John Brozick. And Jake looked at me and he said, "Mr. Brozick was my teacher." He said, "I'm sorry to tell you this." He said, he pulls out his phone, and on his phone is a picture of my cousin. He said, "My mom sent this, your cousin, I'm sorry to tell you, your cousin died 2 days after Christmas of pancreatic cancer." I learned about my cousin's death from a stranger who I just asked, "Where are you from?" Doesn't end there. 2 weeks ago, Jake sends me an email. "Tom, I bet you didn't see this." I open it up, and it's a link. Do you know that the Green Bay Packers are the only team in the NFL that has a fan hall of fame? Every year, people recommend people to be a fan, and they only have 17. This year, they chose my cousin John posthumously. And the video is of Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, giving the plaque to my third cousin, who runs out in the field, and there's the whole family waiting to celebrate because my cousin John used every Packer Sunday as an opportunity to gather the family. See, what's really extraordinary in this, everybody wants to be seen and everybody wants to be heard, but they can't if we are distracted. They can't if we are not willing to be silent, to be present. Whole persons, making whole persons, change the world.
Hey, so I have up here, since nobody had their phones out when you were talking. That is so cool. So cool. So, the feedback survey is available through this QR code. You'll get some QR codes. If you can't do it, please fill out the feedback survey. There's 8 questions. Alverno has a very nice guest Wi-Fi if it's a little slow on your phone, so just connect to that. But please fill out the feedback survey. We are at 1:31, so thank you, and thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Alverno. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. Drive safe.